Hi there, good evening. This is Timothy, and I am going to be introducing you to some simple concepts that hopefully will assist you in improving your overall quality of life and your sense of health and well-being. And for those of you who don't know, I work with a wonderful agency for the last almost 5 years, 4.5 years now. And I work with people who are suffering chronic, severe substance use disorders. And a lot of the information, not only do I provide to my patients in individual sessions and group sessions, it's information that I myself am learning and have adapted and assimilated in my own life and improving my own quality of life and well-being. And what I want to present to you is really nothing new, actually. It is really nothing we haven't heard before in some shape, form, or fashion. And what I want to start off with is some of the basic tenets to lay the groundwork for you to understand wherever you're at in life and whatever challenges you're facing. And so for the most essential groundwork we want to set is a quote that comes from Plato, and Plato actually quotes Socrates. And if you understand Greek philosophy and you understand the ancient Greek culture, this will make sense. Even if you don't understand it, hopefully it'll make sense because it's very simple, it's basic. And so Socrates was on trial for what he was teaching, for the beliefs that he espoused, and the way it impacted that culture and those people. And ultimately, the outcome of this trial ended with Socrates being put to death for what he believed in. At that trial, Socrates basically is quoted as saying this: "An unexamined life is not worth living." Okay, so an unexamined life is not worth living. What we have here is something to build on and want to build on. Because when you look at various religious teachings, you look at various religious texts, you look at certain philosophies, and especially within the context of working with people in recovery, one of the main components of those systems, recovery, religion, philosophy, is to bring an individual to a place to not only examine their lives, it brings them to a place to question their lives, to basically answer 3 important questions. If you've seen my previous video that I did, this will make sense for review. For those of you who haven't, hopefully you'll get some basic information here on this. And that is essentially coming to terms and understanding who we are as individuals, developing a sense of meaning and purpose in life, and then being able to give out of ourselves to be of service towards other people within our families, within our relationships at work, within our relationships within the community. Whatever roles we play, we are constantly being of service towards others while others are being of service towards us. And there's fluidity in those healthy, dynamic relationships that we have. And the most significant relationship we actually have is with ourselves. And so, what do we understand? What do we know about an unexamined life is not worth living? Well, today, people tend to base their existence on basically what taking it from something, what I can achieve. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. We want to be able to have some achievement. We want to be able to have some accomplishments in our lives. We want to be able to set goals, and we want to be able to move and progress and grow. That's fine and good, and that's very proactive and very admirable. The problem is when we get into what we refer to as dysfunctional thought processing. We get into inability to regulate our emotions. We get into being judgmental, critical of not only ourselves, but being judgmental and critical of other people around us. And that is where and I'll talk about this in another video session. What basically comes down to is we have our soul self, our essence, our being. In Christianity, we call that the spirit. Most religions believe it is the spirit, the essence, the soul, the heart. In more of a philosophical terminology, some in recovery, I know in the early or the mid 80s, the late 80s and the early 90s, for those people who were brought up in homes where there's family dysfunction, alcoholism, drug use, abuse, things like that. They refer to as the inner child, and so forth. The other component we have is the ego. Now, most of us pretty much operate out of the ego, and that's where the criticism, the judgment comes. And so, getting back to Socrates, the unexamined life is not worth living because there's no value when we are not operating under the pretense of examining ourselves, examining our thoughts, examining our behaviors, examining the reasons we do the things we do, the reasons we make the decisions we make. And so we go from an unexamined life is not worth living to placing ourselves in a place where we can begin to examine our lives. Okay, so we want to examine our lives. Examine everything about us, who we are, what we're all about. And so we begin by doing the following. And it comes down to this. Comes down to this. Okay. It comes down to a correlation of really our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. It comes down to how those lead into the behaviors. And I'm not talking about the actual actions we take. I'm talking about how our body's actually responding and behaving in its natural capacity in relationship to these emotions. And then those consequences that follow. You've probably heard the term, you are free to make the choice, you're not free from the consequences of that choice. There's validity to that, and I'll show you the reason there is validity to that. Because every choice, every decision that we make involves thoughts and feelings. Okay, so I'm going to break this down even more. These thoughts and feelings stem from perceptive beliefs. Now, these perceptive beliefs and values contribute to the way we're thinking and how we're feeling. Now, a lot of us don't really take time to really sit down and think about the way we're thinking and how we're feeling, especially if you have a very hectic, busy life. And so what tends to happen is we get ourselves overwhelmed. And that's the consequence of these things. How we respond to other people involves this process. You know, the underlying perceptive beliefs and values. There are essentially three things that causes dysfunctional thought processing. And Albert Ellis came up with a therapeutic model, and it's called reality emotive behavior therapy. And this came out of the progressive movement from psychoanalytical treatment, Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung, things like that, to where, you know, whatever happened in the past happened in the past. We can't go back. We can't, we can't undo the damage and the situations that happened in the past. What we can do is focus on the here and now, what's happening here and now, and how we are emotionally reactive and responsive towards other people, other places, emotionally reactive and responsive to people, places, things, and events. So the external is what we refer to as stressors. These are externals. These are typically either limited control that we have over or we have no control over. Remember, our greatest delusion or our greatest illusion is the ability to control. If I am able to control particular people in my lives, then they'll be able to do what I expect them to do. You know, that's okay if you're a parent and you're dealing with a child. You know, but when you're in a relationship, people are going to think, people are going to feel, and people are going to do what they're going to do, and you have no control over that. And so it begs the question, can people make me sad? Can people make me angry? Can people make me upset? No, because they don't have that power. We think they have that power. We want to give them that power. It is an illusion, though. And so if they don't have the power to make me feel a certain way, then how come I feel the way I feel? Well, because, again, it's the response. There's a thought. There are attached emotions to those thoughts. And those emotions and those thoughts are creating the specific types of behaviors, how our body's responding. You know, for instance, if you're angry over something somebody did or something somebody said, your body's going to respond naturally. It's the fight, flight, or freeze. It's our primitive survival tactic. People, places, things, and events are stressors. All of this is more internal. It's more of our stress response. And so we break this down even further. Our perceptive beliefs and values. Where do these perceptive beliefs and values stem from? Well, first, our family of origin. What type of family did we grow up in? What was the family values? What were some of the family expectations? What were some of the roles that you played? Regardless of whether it was healthy or dysfunctional, we carry on those family expectations, those family traditions, those families' beliefs, those family values. The other component is the cultural or ethnicity values and beliefs. Each culture has different values. Each culture has different beliefs. And even within those main cultures, there's subcultures too as well. For instance, an example here is here in America, with the whole argument with immigration and all of that stuff that's going on right now in the news that we're reading about, really boils down to, on the one side, you have people who value the need to respect and obey the established laws of the land. There's no argument there, and there ought to not be argument there. And then there are beliefs that people on the other side say, well, yes, however, what if they're coming in and seeking asylum and they're escaping tyranny? You know, what wasn't America founded on the fact that people were escaping tyranny? They were immigrating from an oppressive society and finding a new place to live, to be able to live free. And so the argument's going back and forth, and these are some specific talking points, whether people realize it or not. It's just an example. And so our culture, on the one hand, believes that you got to come into this country legally, you've got to obey the laws of the land, you have to assimilate and become an American citizen. And so there's that argument. And that's where it stems from, is the cultural differences and the ethnic differences and expectations. The other thing that contributes to our perceptive beliefs and values is gender. Okay, now I'm not going to spend any time on the whole social issue of gender. And again, that's another component that we're seeing playing out, is the values and the beliefs. And gender has a lot to influence. Women will typically view and perceive things differently than men. So on and so forth. So we have the gender, we have age. Younger people are going to basically have different values and beliefs. They're going to perceive things differently. They're going to see things differently. Young adults, middle-aged, senior, elderly. We all are at a different place in life. We all grow up with different cultural ideas, values, and beliefs. Okay. Age. Education plays a role in developing our perceptions and beliefs. The higher the education a person achieves, the different perceptions and the beliefs and the values they're going to espouse. The lower educational, there is going to be differences of beliefs, values, and different perceptions. This is not good or bad. These are just the objective truths in understanding and putting this all together. So education. Social status. So where do we fit in society economically? What is our, growing up impoverished, we're going to definitely have different values and beliefs. Growing up in a very affluent home, affluent atmosphere, we're going to have different values and beliefs. And we're going to have different perceptions. So family of origin, culture, ethnicity, gender, age, education, social status, and there's several things. Okay, now I want to get back to Albert Ellis. All of these coincide with what Albert Ellis refers to as the three musts. The first must is I must be perfect and do well. Otherwise, I'm not worth anything. I'm insignificant. I have no value. I have nothing to contribute. I've got to be good at everything that I do. I've got to be perfect. I've got to be on point. I've got to do well. I've got to have some type of accomplishment. Okay? And the second, people must treat me with dignity and respect. Okay, that seems to be a valid point. Yes, we all want to be treated with dignity and respect. We want to be respected. We want to be honored. We want to be acknowledged. We want to be validated. Those are our personal expectations. Those are our wants. Those are our desires. And if we know about life, there is nothing in the rule book that says that people are required to treat us with dignity and respect. It is nice when they do, and it is nice to expect it. Humanity is not required to do that. Well, wait, Timothy, what about the golden rule? You know, you're a Christian. What about the golden rule? What about do unto others as you would have them do unto you? Well, here's the thing about what Christ was teaching there. He wasn't saying expect other people to do what you want to have done unto you. He said to do, to take action towards doing things toward other people that you expect to have them do towards you. If you expect people to not call you names, what he's actually saying is instead of expecting them to do to you what you want, what he's saying is for you to not engage in name calling. It isn't about the other person, it is about you. And that's the point that I'm making here. It's about you, I, me, this person right here in existence. Because if I do what I know I want to do in relationship to what I hope to expect in return, then my life is going to be that much more significant, that much more worthwhile, and that much more prosperous. Because it isn't about other people, what they are or are not doing. It is about what we are and what we are doing or not doing. And so when people throw out the golden rule, and they do, especially in group, when I do this type of conversation with them, what about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you? It's about doing things towards people that you want to have if others were to do that towards you, because it's about what you're doing. So here's the third thing. One of the other greatest delusions that we have as human beings is the idea that life is not supposed to have any type of hardships. Statistically speaking, an individual in their average lifespan, and I've actually looked it up, I can't remember the reference, a typical human being in the average human lifespan will experience at least 2 major traumatic events in their entire lifespan. Now, some people may experience more than 2. Some people may not ever experience any real traumatic, natural disasters are a traumatic experience. Car accidents, medical issues, health complications, loss of employment. It doesn't have to be like a major world is ending, apocalyptic, catastrophic event, it is something that is traumatic for that individual. Okay? So we have this preconceived notion, we have this expectation that life is supposed to be fair. Life is not supposed to throw us any type of hardships or curveballs. Now, I don't know anybody out there who has lived a life that is perfectly free of hardships and challenges. I want to say that again. I don't know anybody who has lived, who is living, and who is to live, ever have a life free of hardships, of challenges, of trials, of adversity. So, one of my favorite scripture passages I want to bring into this is the idea, and it comes from the Book of Mormon, that there must needs be an opposition in all things. Adversity actually teaches us things. It gives us, without a life of hardship, we don't learn, we don't grow, we don't stretch ourselves. And when you read a lot of the stories of the people who overcome some of the most traumatic experiences in their lives, they actually come to a place where they learn from it. In fact, one of the other modern therapeutic approaches in the field that I work in was developed by Marsha Linehan out of the University of Washington. It is dialectical behavior therapy, DBT for short. Typically is more for those who are borderline personality disorder types. And a lot of it focuses on mindfulness, radical acceptance, forgiveness, and things like that. And the point of, and the heart of DBT, is the same thing. REBT, cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. All of this has the same premise that we work with our patients on, from either my perspective or from a mental health perspective, things like that. And the point I'm making here is that the reality outside of our illusion is life isn't fair. And what set Marsha Linehan on her journey, from what I understand and from what I've researched about this and DBT and the history behind it, is she wanted to know the difference between the people who faced a hardship, an adversity in their lives, and how they rose above it, whereas another individual faced a similar situation, similar hardship, and were crushed by it. And she came up, and that's how the DBT, the whole radical acceptance type movement began. And I'll save that for a whole different session. So you want to stay tuned to what we're talking about here. So life must be fair and I must not experience hardships. Well, a lot of this is dysfunctional thought processing. It goes back to what I'm talking about. Because these are unrealistic expectations. Okay? And Albert Ellis referred to them as musts, the three major musts. And what we want to do is that we will need to come to a place to acknowledge that we're not going to be perfect. I'm not perfect. There's nothing I can do to be perfect. And I'm not going to do well. Even in what I do as a living, even what I do in my personal life, I'm still got to keep practicing. Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. And we grow and we continue to do that. We continue to practice. We continue to expand ourselves and stretch ourselves more and more. And we're not going to do well sometimes. We're going to have bad days. That gets back to this. So we have to come to a place of unconditional acceptance of who we are as we are individuals. Good, bad, and different. Character flaws and everything. The fact of the matter is, we also have to unconditionally accept people for who they are and where they're at, and realize people are people. The reason why I'm laughing is because sometimes when I do this in a group session and I say people are people, I end up start singing the one song, "People are people, so why should it be? You and I are always disagree." And so I kind of break out some type of song and dance on that. So a little comical relief there. But that is true. People are people, and they're going to do what people do. And they're operating under their own thought process, their own emotions. And they're going to behave the way they choose to behave because of that. So people must treat me with dignity and respect. We know that's an illusion. We know that's an unrealistic expectation. We come to a place to realize and accept the reality that sometimes people are just not going to like me. It doesn't matter. And I don't need to justify the reason why they don't like me. It's upsetting. It's hurtful. It's disappointing. That's all valid. The reality is, people are people. And the last thing is we know that we are going to have hardships. We are going to experience some type of crisis. We're going to experience some type of adversity. And how we choose going through it and how we choose when we come out of it determines whether it makes or breaks us as individuals. And so what we're going to do in understanding all of this is it comes down to adjusting our perceptions by understanding what it is we value. Because where do we derive meaning and purpose? Our meaning and purpose stems from the perceptions that we have in relationship to what we believe and what we value. And those are important. So when it comes down to examining our lives, and it comes down to understanding who we are as individuals, it comes down to that we start with what it is that we value, what it is that we believe in, what gives us hope, what gives us faith. And I'm not talking about in any specific type of religious context. I'm talking about and I'm not talking about in a philosophical context. What I'm talking about is the basic essence, the groundwork. Values and our beliefs gives us the guidelines to operate in. And so you think about driving along the highway. You have guardrails. And those guardrails helps us to not, go out. They protect us. They're a protective barrier. Okay? And we know as long as we keep the guardrails in our sight and we are, keeping ourselves there and keeping ourselves in our own lane, we're fine, we're safe, and we're operating in our own lane. The moment we get distracted and we veer off, and that's the reason why we have a lot of these laws of distracted driving, falling asleep at the wheel. We're not present, we're not paying attention, we're not looking at and being aware of what's happening around us. And then we get into accidents, or we have something that happens. I'll go further and say that they're not just the guidelines that we operate within, they're also the boundaries we operate from and we live up to, because our values and beliefs helps us establish those boundaries. Because when we set up those boundaries based on what we value and believe, we don't want to compromise that. The values and beliefs also gives us our understanding of who we are as individuals. They give us an understanding of how we can derive a sense of meaning and purpose. And one thing that I do in a session, when we do a values exercise session, is I have patients identify out of 83 values their top values that are very important, most important, and important. And then we work through and top 5, and then we work through and the top 3, and then ranking them from very important, most important to important in each column. And the first 3, I have them write out a declaration statement. I am an individual who is, and then whatever the value is for those 3 values, or the definition of those values. And then I have them write a purpose statement. My purpose in recovery is to live a life based on, and then whatever those remaining 6 values are. So perception is correlated with our beliefs and values. They give us a sense of meaning and purpose that we derive from. And so I just wanted to give you the basic framework of where we're going to operate from, where we're going to come from. Because this is important, because you want to grasp this, because we're going to build on this. I build on this, and we begin to see how it kind of comes together in relationship to not only how we relate to ourselves, how we relate and respond to other people, other people's behaviors, and that. So thank you for your time. I appreciate you watching this. Click subscribe on my YouTube. You can visit me and connect with me via Twitter. I have a Facebook page, and you can connect there. Visit www.timothyRberman.com, and I will present articles there as well. Have a good night. Sleep tight. Enjoy the rest of your evening.